3 miles deep beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, scientists have just found something that shouldn't be there. Not a fossil, not a rock, but something that looks like a structure. For decades, we've been told that Antarctica has always been a cold, barren wasteland, lifeless, a white expanse at the edge of the world. But radar scans, satellite imagery, and ice cores are now telling a very different story of a world that was once warm, forested, and teeming with life, and a civilization that may have called it home long before history was recorded, then vanished in a catastrophe most people have never heard of. This is what makes it so strange. Antarctica is twice the size of Australia and contains 90% of the planet's ice. Today, ice-penetrating radar has revealed buried valleys, mountain ranges, and landscapes the size of Belgium, sealed beneath the ice and untouched for at least 14 million years. The fact that Antarctica was once green is no mystery. It's scientifically proven. The real question is when it was green. Did the ice exist before we arrived? Or was someone here to witness the last patches of forest before the cold devoured them? Let us start with what we actually know for certain. During the Eocene epoch, roughly 56 to 34 million years ago, Antarctica sat exactly where it sits today, right over the South Pole. But it was nothing like the Antarctica we know now. Fossilized forests of beech trees, conifers, and ferns have been discovered on Alexander Island and the Antarctic Peninsula. Some fossilized trees still standing upright, as tall as 23 feet, rooted in ancient soil. Temperatures at the time are estimated to have ranged between 55 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, mild enough to support lush, temperate rainforests even through months of polar darkness. There was no massive ice sheet reflecting sunlight back into space, which meant the entire planet ran warmer as a result. Then everything changed. The supercontinent Gondwana broke apart. Australia and South America drifted away, and a stretch of water opened up between Antarctica and South America called the Drake Passage. That single geological event created the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a massive ring of cold water that sealed Antarctica off from warmer currents to the north. Slowly, the forests died, the ice crept in, and the continent we know today was born. Here is the fascinating part. Researchers from Rice University later found ancient pollen buried in sediment off the Antarctic Peninsula, proving the region was still covered in tundra as recently as 12 million years ago. That means Antarctica's transformation into a frozen wasteland did not happen overnight. It happened gradually, over millions of years, and some areas stayed ice-free far longer than anyone expected. So the science confirms Antarctica had the right conditions to support life for an enormous stretch of time. The controversy begins when we ask exactly how long that window stayed open, and whether it ever overlapped with us. Before we go deeper, I'm curious who's out there tonight. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. In 1929, inside the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, researchers discovered a fragment of a map drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. Only about 1/3 of the original map survives, but what remains is startling. It accurately shows the coastline of South America, and according to researcher Graham Hancock, it also shows a southern landmass in the exact location of Antarctica, not covered in ice, but with a coastline resembling the actual shape of the continent underneath. Here is why that matters. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820. The Piri Reis map was drawn 300 years earlier, and it appears to show the region ice-free, a condition scientists say last existed more than 6,000 years ago. Piri Reis himself admitted the map was compiled from older source charts, some reportedly going back to the era of Christopher Columbus and beyond. Hancock's theory takes this a step further. He argues that certain sections of the map show longitude with a level of accuracy that should have been technologically impossible for the 16th century. Calculating longitude at sea requires a marine chronometer, a device that was not invented until the late 1700s. If the map is accurate, it suggests it was based on charts made by someone with navigational knowledge far more advanced than anything documented in that era. Critics push back hard on this. They argue the so-called Antarctic coastline could simply be a misdrawn or exaggerated section of the South American coast, something common in old cartography, and that any longitude accuracy could be coincidental. It is a fair point, but it does not fully explain why a landmass resembling Antarctica appears on a map drawn 3 centuries before anyone knew Antarctica existed. Whether you believe it is evidence of lost ancient knowledge or a cartography coincidence, the mystery of the Piri Reis map has never been fully resolved, and that uncertainty is exactly why it keeps resurfacing every time someone tries to challenge the official timeline of human history. If you think this video deserves more attention, please click the hype button below. Each hype will help this video get recommended more often. In late 1946, the United States launched the largest Antarctic expedition in history. It was called Operation High Jump, and it was massive. Over 4,700 men, 13 ships, and dozens of aircraft, all commanded by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, an experienced polar explorer who had already flown over both the North and South Poles decades earlier. Officially, the mission was about training personnel in cold weather conditions and mapping the continent. The team did accomplish that. They photographed roughly 1.5 million square miles of Antarctic terrain and established a research base called Little America 4 on the Ross Ice Shelf. But here is what makes people suspicious. The mission was scheduled to run for 6 to 8 months. It ended in less than 2 months. No official explanation was ever given for why it wrapped up so abruptly. Around this time, reports began circulating that Byrd had encountered unidentified aircraft during reconnaissance flights, fast-moving objects that could not be explained by any known technology of that era. In interviews given after the mission, Byrd himself warned that the United States could one day face an attack launched from the polar regions. A strange statement for someone who supposedly just spent 2 months mapping empty ice. Then there is the story of Byrd's alleged secret diary, a document that surfaced years later and has never been verified as authentic. According to this account, Byrd's aircraft entered a hidden valley during a flight over the pole, an area with green landscapes and a warmer climate completely out of place in the frozen exterior surrounding it. The diary claims he was met by an advanced civilization who warned him about the dangers of nuclear weapons and urged humanity to choose peace over self-destruction. Most historians dismiss this diary as fabricated, since there is no confirmed source and Byrd never publicly claimed any of this happened. But the timing is interesting. This story took off in a decade filled with real government secrecy, real nuclear anxiety, and a real unexplained early conclusion to one of the largest polar operations ever conducted. Whether Byrd actually saw something impossible, or whether the entire story was invented decades later, Operation High Jump remains one of the most debated events in Antarctic history, and it laid the foundation for nearly every Antarctic conspiracy theory that followed. Quick gut check. Do you believe Byrd actually saw something out there? Yes or no? Drop it below before we get to the part that's even harder to explain. Byrd's story is almost 80 years old, so let us come closer to the present. In November of 1995, a United States Navy C-130 flew out of MCM Uirttiachen on a routine run. 15 scientists from the National Science Foundation had set up a remote camp in Marie Byrd Land, and for several days they had gone silent, though protocol demanded a radio check every day. The crew flew tighter and tighter circles in clear weather. They could see everything. The huts, the fuel tanks, the snowmobiles lined up in a row. What they could not see was a single person. On the ground, it was worse. A month of supplies, a working radio, no tracks in the snow, no struggle, no bodies. 15 people had simply stopped existing. Then, more than a week later, the crew was scrambled back. The scientists were there radioing in a panic, begging to be pulled out that instant. They boarded in total silence. Not one word for the entire 2-hour flight. Some could not move and had to be unbuckled and walked out like sleepwalkers. Their equipment was locked away and, according to the account, shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, home of the Air Force's old UFO unit, Project Blue Book. Then 2 men from Washington told the crew the truth was simple. You did not see this. None of it happened. So you are probably already asking the obvious question. If this really happened, why not just put these scientists in front of a camera and let them tell us what they saw? That question is the whole heart of it. Because in every version of this story, the answer is the same. The people who could tell us are exactly the people who were removed from the record. The scientists were walked onto that second plane and never surfaced publicly again. The one man willing to describe that night, the flight engineer, will still only let himself be called Brian. Even the journalist who brought the account into the open, Linda Moulton Howe, was working from witnesses who refused to attach their names to any of it. The missing interview is not a gap in the story. According to the people telling it, the silence is the story. And to be fair, this account stands on a single witness. There is no photograph, no second crewman on the record, and even the documentary that made it famous tells you to take it with caution. But that same man described something else, unmarked craft crossing the ice at impossible speed, and on that point he is not alone. Multiple Navy crews from those years describe the same sightings, so routine they became mess hall talk. One person inventing a story is easy to dismiss. The same story arriving in the same shape, from different people with a career to lose and nothing to gain, is harder to wave away. If this story's got its hooks in you by now, take a second to hit that like button. It's the only thing that tells the algorithm to push hidden history like this to more people. Consider it your vote for keeping stories like this alive. Now let us get to the theory that ties everything together. The one modern research is starting to take seriously. Researcher Graham Hancock proposes that around 10,600 BCE, Earth was struck by a comet, or a series of comet fragments, triggering a global catastrophe. This lines up almost exactly with the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, a documented era of abrupt climate change that started around 12,900 years ago and lasted roughly 1,300 years. During this time, global temperatures suddenly plummeted, sea levels shifted dramatically, and a huge portion of Earth's large mammal species, known as megafauna, went extinct within a geological blink of an eye. For a long time, mainstream scientists dismissed the idea of a sudden global cataclysm at the end of the Ice Age. Today, that skepticism has softened considerably. Ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica show clear evidence of a rapid climatic shift exactly when the Younger Dryas begins. Sediment layers around the world show the same abrupt environmental disruption. Something happened, and it happened fast. 5. Hancock's theory suggests that at the center of this event was not a scattered group of hunter-gatherers, but a genuinely advanced civilization, one capable of complex architecture, astronomical observation, and long-distance navigation, that was wiped out almost entirely. He points to sea levels rising 400 feet at the end of the last ice age, flooding coastlines and continental shelves where such a civilization could have existed, erasing almost all physical evidence of it. If true, This would explain something that has puzzled archaeologists for decades. Structures like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to around 11,600 years ago, show a level of architectural sophistication that should not exist for a culture believed to still be hunter-gatherers at the time. Interestingly, that same date lines up with when the ancient philosopher Plato claimed the legendary civilization of Atlantis sank beneath the sea. Coincidence, or a memory passed down through myth of a real event? And there is a second mechanism most people never hear about, one that connects this cataclysm directly to the climate. Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that deflects deadly solar radiation, is not fixed. It weakens, it wanders, and every few 100,000 years it can collapse and flip entirely. During one of these episodes, the field can fall to as little as 10% of its strength, leaving the surface far more exposed. In 2021, a team from the University of New South Wales linked one such magnetic breakdown, the Lachamp event, to a wave of climate disruption and megafaunal extinctions. The poles, it turns out, are not the fixed points we imagine. And when they become unstable, the consequences can reach all the way down to the ground beneath our feet. Let us bring this back to solid ground, literally. In 1912, members of Robert Falcon Scott's Antarctic expedition discovered fossilized leaves resembling beech trees near the Beardmore Glacier, just 500 kilometers from the South Pole. At first, scientists assumed it was some kind of mistake. Later research confirmed the fossils were real. Since then, researchers have uncovered upright fossilized trees on Alexander Island, some over 20 feet tall, surrounded by ancient pollen and plant remains from a temperate rainforest that thrived roughly 100 million years ago. This is not speculation. This is confirmed paleobotany. Antarctica was once green, and multiple layers of evidence prove it stayed at least partially green far longer than most people realize, with tundra conditions persisting as recently as 12 million years ago. So here is the real mystery scientists are wrestling with. Homo sapiens have existed for roughly 300,000 years. Modern ice sheets in Antarctica have been forming for over 14 million years. On paper, the math does not allow for humans and an ice-free Antarctica to overlap. But there is a theory that tries to close that gap, and it is where the science gets genuinely contested. A magnetic flip we just saw can move the poles of the field. A far more radical idea proposes that the solid crust can move too, known as crustal displacement, or true polar wander. It suggests the planet's entire outer shell can slide over the molten interior beneath it, like the loosed skin of an orange turning around the fruit inside. A continent sitting in a mild zone could be dragged toward a pole, and the ice would begin to build almost at once. But here is the distinction most videos skip. A magnetic flip does not move continents. Mainstream geologists are clear that plate tectonics does not permit the crust to lurch that fast, and treat the two as separate phenomena. The theory this video has followed asks a bolder question. I know, bull. What if a single cataclysm, a comet striking Earth at the end of the Ice Age, was violent enough to disturb both at once? There is no accepted evidence that it did. But if it had, it would explain how a land now buried at the bottom of the world might once have sat far enough north to be green, warm, and seen. Still with me? If your version of history just cracked a little, let me know down below. The next stop isn't even in Antarctica. And the story does not end at Antarctica. If an advanced civilization really was erased from our timeline, the ice would not be the only place still holding the scars. In 1922, in what is now Pakistan, archaeologists uncovered a 4,000-year-old city called Mohenjo-Daro, the Mound of the Dead. For its age, it was staggeringly advanced, with grid-planned streets, covered drains, and sanitation the world would not match for millennia. It was built for tens of thousands, yet only a few dozen skeletons were ever found, some lying in the open, side by side, as if they died where they stood. Here is the claim that turned it into a legend. In the 1970s, researcher David Davenport argued that part of the city bore the marks of a single violent blast, with an apparent epicenter and fragments of brick and pottery vitrified into glass by heat the ancient world could not have produced. Supporters tie this to India's oldest Sanskrit epics, which describe a weapon brighter than 1,000 suns that turns cities to ash in an instant. To them, not myth, but memory of a war fought with technology we are told never existed. Mainstream archaeology rejects all of it. The city most likely declined slowly as its rivers shifted. The skeletons come from different centuries, and no blast layer or radiation has ever been found. But the theory refuses to die for the same reason we are out here on the ice. Every so often, the tidy story of primitive ancestors collides with something it cannot explain, and people begin to ask what else the textbooks left out. And if you're the kind of person who's always suspected school left a few things out, do me a favor and hit subscribe now. This channel is built for exactly that itch. So where does that leave us? We have fossil evidence proving Antarctica was once warm and forested. A 300-year-old map that shows an ice-free coastline before Antarctica was ever discovered. One of the largest military operations in history, ending mysteriously early under an admiral who later warned of an attack from the poles. And a documented global cataclysm that lands at the exact moment ancient myths describe an advanced civilization slipping beneath the waves. None of this proves a lost world lies frozen beneath the ice, but it does prove the real story of Antarctica is nothing like the empty wasteland we were handed in school. Something happened at the end of the last ice age, something erased an enormous slice of life on Earth almost overnight. And whatever it was, the ice is still holding on to it. But here's the part I saved for last. Everything we've talked about so far, the maps, the fossils, the theories, all of it comes from the edges of Antarctica. The parts we're allowed to see, because there is one place explorers have described for almost a century that never shows up on any modern map. They called it the ice wall. A sheer barrier of ice rising out of the frozen sea, and beyond it, something that 90-year-old expedition footage was never supposed to reveal. The men who filmed it came back changed. The footage was buried for decades. And when you finally see what waits on the other side of that wall, I promise you will understand why they tried so hard to keep it frozen. So don't go anywhere, because what comes next is the part of this story they really didn't want you to find.